Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Wicklum, and welcome to our latest Owl's Nest podcast. This recording is a continuation of a discussion I had with our guests, Jay Davis and Hugo Fuentes. In this half of our conversation, we talk about data strategy and performance indicators, amongst other topics. I hope you enjoy. Great points, Jay. Jay, let's talk data, and particularly data strategy. I know Hugo is chomping at the bit to get to this one, so I'll start with Jay. How are well-managed companies using data to help them prepare for a post-COVID reality?
All right, so data, what a big topic. For me, the first question is, what is a data strategy? And I would say that I see good data strategies where the organization knows how all of the data and the measurements are connected together to make money or provide a service. A lot of people would say, I work in a company that has a ton of data, KPIs and measurements, but I don't understand how they connect together. It kind of feels like a garbage can. Got all this data and measurements inside of a garbage can. I lift up the lid. Depending on what business case I'm trying to prove out, or depending on what I'm trying to provide evidence for, I pull out the data that I want. And I do it in ad hoc reports, and I put it together, and that proves out my case. That's one perspective. Other people would say, yes, my company has a well-organized, well-understood data strategy. It's kind of like a vending machine. I can go to the vending machine and I can see the chocolate bars in one area, the chips in another area, and it's well organized and I can see it really visual. I press a button, I get what I want, and then I go on my merry way. Or they might say, yeah, I have a really well organized data strategy because it's like a Christmas tree. At the top of the Christmas tree is the financial indicators. The next level are the key performance indicators. And the very bottom of the tree is the process indicators that are on the floor. And that's where the levers are located. If I pull a lever at the bottom of the tree and a process indicator, I know when I pull that lever, it's going to impact the KPI and the financial indicator. So for people that work in companies that understand their data in this type of manner, I think they're going to do very well post-COVID. And the reason being is this. They're going to be able to look at the data in a common way, well understood and clear, analyze it much faster than other companies who have to go to the garbage can and pull out a variety of different data to prove points. So what the good companies will do, they will move faster from analysis to action. And because we don't know what reality looks like with post-COVID, people are going to have to pivot and make quick decisions. So the companies that is moving faster with the data from analysis to action, they will pivot faster, they will be more agile, and they'll gain market share. The other ones that don't have a well-organized data strategy, they're going to spend a lot of time in internal discussions proving the case and deciding on what they should do before they get to action. So two companies. One company is moving fast with actions. The other time is spending a lot more time on analysis. The company that's taking action is going to win. So that's kind of how I see the data strategy in that affecting, I'll say, some of the leadership decisions.
Perfect. Okay, Hugo, I'm releasing the hounds.
I'm 100% agreement with what Jason mentioned, and I think he brought very nice analogies. That I'm gonna take your analogy of the vending machine. Hopefully, you don't have a copyright on it, but I'm gonna I'm gonna take it. I think it's a great analogy. I believe that the topic about data strategy is a whole podcast itself. So one of the things that I find by talking to different executives is that data is still an area where there's a disconnect between what people think from what people actually do. And I think that there's a perception and a speech around the importance of data to improve business performance. But the reality is that the average company is still in the infancy of really capitalizing from their own data. I think, and the gap is there. I think people and companies are missing opportunities to do, amazing things. As an example, I was talking the other day to a procurement manager in a company, and he mentioned to me how hard is for them to get a concise, clear idea on how suppliers have been delivering materials through this crisis. So his company, has an ERP in place. However, they don't do much with data available in the system. Things like measuring on-time delivery performance at supplier, purchase order, and even line level. So he said to me, it is too cumbersome, right? So to come up with those numbers on a real time basis is too cumbersome. I need too many internal resources to do that. So I challenged him, back, saying it is much worse not knowing what actions you as a manager should take to help your manufacturing, planning, and logistics team. So you have to devote resources, and you have to think about your data strategy, as Jay mentioned before. So companies are not, my message here is that I think that there's a huge opportunities for companies to do much better with their existing data sets. I mean, we're not talking about bringing new fancy tools that involve advanced machine learning and AI technologies. No, we're not even talking about that. We're talking about utilizing what you currently have available in your company. So let's say if you have an ERP, or you have multiple ERPs, if you have multiple systems like a warehouse management system or a transportation management system, and but they're not necessarily connected, right, in your internal organization. I think there's an opportunity for doing much more with your existing data and provide some value to your decision making process quickly and effectively. And so that's, I think, the companies taking advantage of that information, that internal. I used to say data is a gold mine as long as you use that gold mine, right? So existing data to monitor your supply chain performance and improve now. So not even think about after the crisis. I mean, now. I mean, that's something that companies can start doing immediately, capitalizing upon that data. And one question and concerns that also is normally raised in discussions that I have with some people sometimes afraid of data quality, right? So they think, the quality of my data internally is not that good. So potentially, whatever I see from, KPIs or metrics are not going to be that good. Yeah, that might be true. I mean, there's no organization that has perfect data. But from my perspective, it's like a chicken and egg thing. So if you don't see your metrics and KPIs, and based upon your existing data, and you won't identify those opportunities for improving the quality of that data. So it's a virtuous cycle that once you visualize your metrics and KPIs, maybe the first picture is going to be ugly, and you're not going to really see reasonable numbers out of your existing data. But once you start identifying those flaws in your process, then you go back to the source and adjust. So you iterate, and after a while, definitely you're going to get access to much better information out of your existing data. So I think companies that capitalize on that opportunity, I think, are going to get better prepared for the future. Definitely.
Hugo, I definitely agree. And I think one thing to consider is that if we divide data up into those three categories, financial indicators, which are lagging indicators, then we've got KPIs and process indicators, which are a little bit more leading indicators. I think a lot of companies obviously have the financial indicators. They've got them organized and everyone understands the balance sheet and all the financial indicators. And also a lot of companies probably have the majority of the key performance indicators aligned with the financial indicators. But where I think companies need to move to next, some of them, is they need the process indicators, because those are the levers. And unless you know what those are and how they connect to the KPIs, then how do you actually have an impact on the financial indicators? So I think that's maybe more the focus. You need to kind of move into organizing some of the KPIs still and the process indicators, so that we all understand which levers we have to pull in order to impact the bottom line.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I like that comment around leading indicators, because I think most of the companies are just looking at history in many of the things that they do, but there's also an opportunity for looking at those indicators that get you closer to, for instance, consumer demand, right?
Right, exactly.
So, Hugo, there have been we just discussed financial indicators and key performance indicators and process indicators. Now, my question would be, are there any of the kind of the middle level of the Christmas tree that Jay referred to? Are there any operational KPIs that you think will rise in importance during and after this crisis?
Yeah, definitely. I from my perspective, I think I would start with customer centric metrics, right? So for instance, an example, monitoring very closely your order fulfillment performance. Right? If you're in a retail environment, or you're a food and beverage manufacturer, serving your retail customers. So how are you serving your customers? And if you're in an industry where, let's say, some syndicated data is available, such as as an example, point of sale data, right? I would really make an effort to monitor in stocks levels daily, right, at a store level, at your customers level. So because that's going to get you closer to actual consumer data, and understanding how consumer data is and demand is behaving. So as an example, for instance, a lot of companies today, their supply chain has been organized by, okay, I'm a manufacturer, I ship product to a distributor, and that distributor ships product to a retail customer, and the retail customer has a distribution center, and then they ship to stores. So there's a lot of steps in that supply chain. So if you, as a manufacturer, is only having visibility, and you're only tracking your shipments to your distributor customer, and not taking monitoring frequently the consumption at a store level in that retail customer, you're going to face a problem. And we have seen the problem happening through the crisis, because I mean, some of the changes that have caught off guard at the manufacturer is primarily because all of those changes in demand happening at retail store level are not visible to the manufacturer until a month later, or even two, depending on the level of stock that each of the players through that supply chain carry. And so the closer you monitor that behavior, the better. So if making use of that syndicated data to get you closer to actual consumer demand at a store level is something that I believe it's nothing new, because I think some companies have been doing that actively for years, but some companies haven't. So I think this is an invite to say those companies, there's an opportunity for monitoring this much more closely. And the other thing I would say is that I would look at suppliers. So how are they delivering? So which are the suppliers that are more challenged in your environment? Which suppliers are not meeting the standard lead time, as an example? Providing them with data in the form of forecast or estimates to help them see what is coming, right? So, and the final one I would say, is definitely inventory levels. So I really focus on analyzing inventory turnover at product level. So not and going detailed, right? So not only staying at the dollar amount at a high level, figure for the purpose of financials only. I think it is really important to understand deep and understand what's going on in detail, particularly when it comes to understanding your velocity from an inventory perspective. SKUs that are turning fast, SKUs that are not turning fast, given all the changes that we're seeing from a demand standpoint.
Perfect. Jay?
Yeah, I think it's very much referring to a lot of the process indicators that are not necessarily as well developed as they need to be. And again, I go back to, unless you develop these process indicators, you don't know what levers to pull in order to affect the KPIs and the financial indicators. I'm going to kind of move off topic, though, to a KPI that maybe isn't as discussed as much as it should, but a lot of good companies do already put safety as the number one KPI, and that's the forefront. However, with COVID-19, I think they're going to need to look a little different as we move forward. There might be more attention on COVID-19 safety KPIs, such as keeping track of infected regions and second waves, because that might impact employee travel. They will also potentially impact supplier lead time and delivery precision, because if those suppliers are affected by a second wave or a high infection rate, they may not get the employees to work, and that might impact delivery precision. So some companies, I believe, will expand their safety KPIs to include health and safety, not just safety, and track the broader responsibility of their employees' health and safety. An example I can think about is I've traveled all over the world. And in some cases, I've done my own threat assessment based on the region I was going into with a little bit of terrorism and a basic threat assessment. Well, that's all fine and well for me to come to that conclusion or to do that analysis based on my own individual views and risk adversity. But maybe what this will do is this will push the health and safety organization or the company to look at not just safety, but health and safety from a broader perspective. And COVID-19 might be the kickstart for that. I think from a cost perspective, variable costs will be a short-term focus to try and save the year. And whereas fixed costs and capital spend KPIs will be more of a strategic decision, and companies will assess how the increase in virtual customers and working from home has impacted the need for capital spend moving forward. Right now, a lot of companies might have 2, 3, 5-year capital spend plans. And those are KPIs that they will use as to whether or not they spent that money and they spent it in the right schedule. But now I think that will be, they should be looked at. They should be looked at to see how the virtual impact can positively impact the capital spend.
Excellent point. I love the idea of the focus being on the qualitative aspect of safety, and making sure that there is a resonation throughout the company about that KPI. It's a great point. Hugo, there have been a lot of changes in the operations and supply chain realms, as you've no doubt seen, because of this pandemic. And many of those changes will eventually revert back to their pre-COVID status. Can you give me one example of an operational change that you think will be permanent?
For sure. I think when I think about this, and I think it's a great question, is how companies are able to build a more resilient supply chain. So I think the whole discussion around risk is a hot topic, and I hope that permanent change in supply chains of the future will be that evaluating that risk and taking some decisive actions to minimize that exposure. I think something that should stay there as a normal, regular practice. So I think things like supplier diversification. So diversifying your supplier base. Normally that entails hard work. So it requires when you go through that route, the route of diversifying your supplier base, it requires a lot of hard work. So you have to qualify alternatives. You have to, and that's something that normally involves paperwork, auditing, negotiation, but it's absolutely necessary, right? So I really hope that executives are wise enough not to easily forget about this and keep balancing the equation, right? So it's not only looking at pure cost reductions, such as we have probably been doing for the last 20 years. So I think it's understanding the supply chain as a more balanced equation where you have to consider risk as one of the key factors in your supply strategy. So, and I think that's one of the things that I hope that is gonna change and is gonna stay more as a fundamental thing for how executives set up, their future supply chains. And the other one that I'm not 100% sure if it's gonna really, stay there, but I'm hoping to is that, understand that decision making based on gut feeling only is not enough. I mean, there's a lot of complexity in global supply chains today, and there's better way to make decisions. I mean, and those decisions have to do with definitely your experience, and the things that you have done in your in your career, that and your team, that you can get that sort of input, definitely. But I think having quick access and easy access to information based on facts, I think makes that executive decision making process much more effective. And I hope that is a key takeaway out of the crisis too, so that companies are really understand that there's an opportunity for enabling a better decision making environment within the organization. And I think, and again, there's no need for reinventing the wheel. It's just making use of the tools that companies have, and the assets that company have, like their own data, as I mentioned before.
Makes sense. Jay, what is an example of an operational change that you think will be permanent?
I think there'll be a few of them. I think the supply chain is going to push some companies to rely more and spend more time focusing on the process associated with selecting, developing, and retaining good suppliers. It's kind of like employees. We want to recruit, we want to develop, and we want to recognize. Well, same thing with suppliers. We do those things well, then we've got a strategic partnership. So I think that process, which is a significant, huge process, and there's lots of details to it, will get a hard look, and some companies will make permanent changes as a result. I think the other aspect is safety. I do believe health and safety of employees is going to take a broader perspective. So I do believe that will have an impact as well. And the other part will be virtual management. No longer will employees accept command and control. You must be face to face. They're not going to accept that. And I think that they'll move more towards virtual type management, which the leaders that will survive, I'll say that type of expectation, will be leaders that already do a good job with engaging their employees, trusting their employees, and setting clear and measurable KPIs that can be tracked on a daily, weekly, monthly perspective, whatever is needed. But there's a trust that the employee understands the expectations, and the leader does as well, and they work together to achieve them. So I think the virtual management will push that expectation harder and faster, and that will impact the selection process of leaders as to which leaders should be selected moving forward.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's the idea of is an employee high potential or high performer, right? And will you promote and put effort into really educating and really growing that high potential employee, or will you make the mistake of doing that same kind of work with a high performer and then taking the high performer out of the operational equation? That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think to emphasize is that, I mean, I grew from where I was when I first started off with strong operational, I'll say, type experience, but I got that experience and I was trained. And then I had to learn how to manage more virtually and trust a little bit more. So there's a path. It's just whether or not the employees are open to seeing that path, and experienced leaders are open to realizing, there's a different way of leading here, and maybe I might not take 100% of the leadership style that I'm seeing, but hey, I'm going to take 20, 30% and incorporate that into my existing leadership style, which will make me better. So I think that's really what most companies are going to look for, is the ability for leaders to adapt and learn and continuously learn.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic, my friends. Do you have any final thoughts to wow and amaze the audience?
Well, I can't imagine. I think what I'm looking forward to is feedback from the audience, because this is just an entry point into having a conversation and a dialogue. Yes, Hugo and I presented our perspectives today, but hopefully that will encourage some dialogue where people will provide some different perspectives. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And number one, I appreciate Ryan, the opportunity of sharing, some thoughts. And I pretty much enjoyed, talking to, you and getting the Jay's perspective. I think it's a great opportunity for sharing some thoughts. And so one of the things final word from my side is to, the value of trust. And I kept thinking about that word when, Jay mentioned that a few times through the discussion. And I think that's a critical thing. I think what we're going through, it also, well, it challenges somehow how many people build trust through the organization, right? So allowing people to work remotely and we accommodating our lives to work in a different setup, it requires a different level of trust. It requires top down and bottom up trust. I'm kind of resetting some of the things that many people have been doing for a long time. So I think that concept is something that I would love to keep thinking about how organizations and how we in our daily routines, we keep developing that value that enables organizations and people and to succeed in this new environment, I guess. Okay, so thank you very much, and I think it's been a great discussion.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Well, a big thank you to both Jay and Hugo for being with us today. I very much appreciate the openness and the candor that you both spoke with. I enjoyed the conversation immensely. And I do hope that you'll both come back to join us again at a future podcast.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Again, much thanks to our guests, Jay Davis and Hugo Fuentes, for taking the time to sit down with me. It was a very informative conversation, and I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed taking part. Stay tuned for our next podcast, where our guests will be Greta Kudelenko, CEO of Acerta, and Hugo Fuentes, CEO of the Owls Solutions. Bye for now, and thanks for being part of the Owls Nest.